So we are now on stage, right? Okay. Welcome everyone to this panel session. I'm Jetzabel Serna and I'm really excited to be moderating today's discussion on the maturity of cybersecurity management system implementations. This morning, our keynote speaker highlighted recent reports on cybersecurity maturity in the automotive industry, and there were also many questions around it. So in this session, we aim to offer a deeper understanding specifically from an auditor's perspective. We have a distinguished panel with us today, each bringing their unique expertise. So let me introduce them. Thomas, who is the lead auditor and head of automotive cybersecurity services at DECRA in the Digital and Product Solutions division. Welcome. Then we have Johana. Johana is a cybersecurity team leader at TÜV Süd Rail Automation with a focus on assessment, training, and certification of automotive and industrial cybersecurity. Welcome, Johana. Welcome to Jako. He is a principal security advisor at UL Solutions, where he's responsible for UL certification programs around ISO 21434, as well as the cybersecurity vehicle type approval services. And finally, we have Dirk, who is an auditor at the Institute of Mobility Automotive Electronics at TÜV North, and he's responsible for the topics of cybersecurity, safety, and software update in the automotive sector. Thank you all for joining us today. So let's get started, and I would like to ask our panelists to briefly share with us what is the current state of maturity for cybersecurity management system implementations in the automotive industry, and how does this compare across the different regions? So, Jako, would you like to start?
Sure. We see quite a wide range of maturity. We have some customers who have basically been implementing from the moment this became a topic, when UNECE started their development, when the ISO 21434 working group started getting going, and as a result are relatively prepared, all the way to those that are essentially now realizing, oh, these are regulations we need to comply with, and how does the standard work? And yeah, you see a corresponding level of maturity as a result. And now the deadline for 2024 for the UNECE R155 is pushing also the stragglers towards getting their CSMS up and running in short order.
Thank you. Thomas.
Yes, thank you very much. We see the complete spectrum. From my point of view as an auditor of the UNECE regulations as well as ISO 21434, we see the complete spectrum of maturity. Those who have been prepared since a long time, who have also understood what a management system is, and that they also understood that a management system for cybersecurity has also to be integrated into the existing process landscape. And the other ones who have, I would say, lost a lot of time, they are under time pressure, and they now started a lot of activities in order to get a cybersecurity management system audit under time pressure, and therefore do not have a lot of evidences to demonstrate that the cybersecurity management system already has been established in the company.
But then you will say that the level of maturity is established.
I would say the level of maturity is established if each of the company or the projects of the company and the project leaders are using it, so that you have evidences that it is proven in the project, that perhaps different stadia of the projects are existing, that not each of the projects from the early beginning has considered the cybersecurity management system. But at least of that, a management system needs evidences to be used in practice. And to be honest, if you look, and your second question, in which area, it seems that in Europe-based customers, they understand what a management system is. sometimes in the Asian area, a lot of customers do not understand what a management system is, although they have it on the paper installed, but not using it in practice.
Okay. Johana, would you like to share your thoughts with us?
Yes, sure. I would say that from the supplier side, most of the big players already have a cybersecurity management system established. However, since the standard is just 2 years old, they don't have any complete projects. So you cannot really say that they're practicing with the cybersecurity management system. So you don't have complete evidences, and you cannot really say that the cybersecurity management system is really working. So this is my point of view at the moment. You have all these processes, all these documents defined, but you cannot really say if it's really working. I think we have to wait until they have at least one pilot project to say this brings something to the processes. It's more expensive. It's faster. We have to improve it. So this is my view at the moment.
And what are your observations across the different markets?
I believe I agree with Thomas. So in Europe, yeah, most of the players already understand what a cybersecurity management system is. They already have a safety management system, so they tweak it and they enhance it with cybersecurity, which is fine. And then you have other markets which are still understanding cybersecurity, how to integrate cybersecurity. It takes a little bit more of effort, but I think all regions are advancing.
Okay, thank you. Dirk, could you share your insights with us?
Okay, I have a similar view. So in Europe, it seems the market all has established a CSMS, the big OEMs and so on. From Asia market, some of them are started and some have implemented a CSMS, but there's also a difference between the knowledge what is a management system is. So there's a little bit difference there. And yeah, what we can say, yeah, one thing is also here in Europe, then for bodybuilder, they are just more starting now, the CSMS. So they have a big pressure then to build up their management system and so on to reach the deadline 2024.
Okay, so nobody actually mentioned the Americas. Are they not getting the certification yet?
So from America, we do get some questions, but for the market, it's predominantly targeting North America, or at least not UNEC regulated countries. There's just less pressure, at least from the regulation side. There are guidelines from NHTSA, for example, on cybersecurity for road vehicles that have been issued, but they essentially have more time to implement cybersecurity, and there's less time pressure as a result.
I agree with Jako. We do get some increase and we have some projects, but they can take some time. So they say we have 2 years or more time. They don't have this 3 months deadline to have everything in place. So I believe that they are also targeting to get the cybersecurity management system certified, but they have a more relaxed pace.
So they are more relaxed, but they are looking forward to adapt also to the same standards and so on, right?
I would say, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so then I will go with my next question. Thomas, in your experience, could you highlight what are the most common gaps you have encountered during audits?
Yes, besides the management system, the implementation of a management system, we often see that the basics for example, for controlled documents, that means the document management, the well-mentioned requirements management, configuration management, and change management, which are part of the ISO 21434. That sometimes they are not completely using or installing those management systems. And sometimes if they install such management parts, as in requirements management and so on, they only relate that to cybersecurity, which is not practicable. This is something which is perhaps not really good understood due to the fact of having no time for a big internal discussion about that. But how can, for example, a change or a configuration management run in parallel to all the existing ones for development, for production, and for post-development or post-production? Therefore, this is something which seems to be not really understood in some cases. And we often detect that this is something which needs to be highlighted and which also leads to non-conformities then in the audit and have to be yes, repaired in a follow-up.
So Johana, have you come across different gaps? What is your view on this?
Sure. To answer this question, I would divide the companies into two groups. The companies with some safety expertise. For these companies, they already have this safety management system established, so they have requirements management, and this is somehow already in a good shape. But when they need to integrate the cybersecurity topics, let's talk about vulnerability management. This is a big point. So the knowledge is missing, and after you have clarified, okay, we need to have these sources, you need to have the triggers, they ask, do we have the competence? Do we have people that can take care of these new topics? This is a big gap that I find in the companies that already have this safety expertise. They can integrate the processes in a good manner, but with the cybersecurity specific topics, they struggle. And then you have the companies that they already been doing cybersecurity for a couple of years, or they have cybersecurity somehow established. They need to document the processes. They need to really have a formal approach to those processes that they already have been using for quite some time. And in common for these two types of companies, what I call is the big problem would be to establish processes which are sinful, that make sense, that are really useful, that bring value. Because if I have seen processes which are described in a fantastic manner, but you think this company is not able to really implement it. They have 10 approvals. They need to go to many people just to get something signed. And I believe, from my point of view, this is detrimental for cybersecurity, because if I'm going to implement cybersecurity and I have to do 1,000 steps and I can go to, use the back door to make it easier, probably I would do that. So having a good explanation, a good processes that can be used is a big issue from my point of view.
Okay. So then I come to Jako. In your view, what are the major challenges that OEMs are facing, OEMs and suppliers, when they are seeking certification or when they want to pass the audits? What are the main challenges for them?
So echoing also what Johana and Thomas said, keeping track of configuration and general information is a struggle as part of the process and managing that data. So we have one class of customers that essentially show up with a huge pile of Excel documents in which everything is tracked, which looks nice for a very small project, but doesn't scale on any form or level as soon as you start factoring in that you have to maintain that over several years or decades even, and have to multiply that to a few hundred projects. So they're not having automation or some kind of tool to facilitate your process. rather and instead relying on Excel and email to make everything work is something that just doesn't work. What we also see is the management system plans for all new developments, where all the new shiny projects get rolled out, and everything is of course very nice because you can pick a new system and a new CPU with all kinds of security features, and everything is working perfectly. But the reality is that 90% of the products that they have already created need to be also adapted and certified under that same program. And when it then comes to applying the process to legacy systems, re-engineering requirements for those legacy systems and creating updates for that, these processes then all of a sudden don't work very well anymore. So that's something we run into. And also with regards to getting certification ready, of course, they start with the modeling phase. So whenever we start an audit, the risk analysis, the specification, this will all be looking very fine and dandy. But when you start looking more at the details of the implementation or the testing evidence, that's where they are still, oh, well, these tests still have to be run, or this feature isn't quite working as it should, or information is just not available because they haven't gotten that far yet. Case in point, for example, the vulnerability management program. It's very hard to show evidence of a vulnerability management program if you've never ever managed a vulnerability in the way that you've described. So that makes the audit process challenging, and our typical gaps that we see.
Okay, thank you. Dirk, would you like to add anything to the challenges?
Yeah, maybe for the implementation of the CSMS, this is often a gap. So processes are in place, but then if you are looking if it's really implemented, the processes, so that the CSMS is working, this is sometimes difficult to see, or it's not ready, the tools are not ready, the roles are not implemented, and this comes then also to a gap which needs to be then closed.
Yeah, please go ahead, sorry.
So it it means there must be also a focus that management system is not only a process, a work of processes, it must be also working and implemented in the company. And also it needs interfaces to maybe to other management systems like quality and where configuration management has to be done and all these things. So this is often then could be a gap.
So Johana and Jako mentioned two important things. On the one side, the topic of vulnerability management, which is one of my favorite topics, and on the other side, the part of not having the skills, the capacity, the expertise, the tools. I mean, you just have the process, and then you lack about the rest. Yeah. So in such cases, there might be organizations that outsource this part of their management system. So when this happens, to what extent this outsourcing of these cybersecurity activities to consultants or service providers pose a challenge or affects the scope of the ISO 21434 audit?
So for the scope of the audit, you always want to see evidence that these parts of the standard or regulation are adhered to. So essentially, you're left with two options. Either you audit the service provided by that external company as part of the audit scope, or you ask the auditee for evidence that they have validated that this service conforms to whatever the regulation requires or the ISO standard.
That means that, for instance, the organization needs to have some kind of already agreement where the consultant company will agree to this kind of audit, right? Thomas, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I would like to add something because every company, independent if it is an OEM or a supplier, they have already an incident management. But due to their IT, due to their web approach, and due to their internal services, I often have seen that those guys who have very good processes are, yes, subcontracted by their own company to extend for triggers, for example, for embedded systems, not only related to IT, because those processes are already existing. They reuse that processes, they add for additional competence, and this is perhaps a solution to avoid outsourcing out of the company. And this is something which, if it is really good understood from the customer, it's a good solution, because then you can see, hey, they have experience, they have evidences, they can do that, and they can show their capabilities concerning detection of events, vulnerability analysis, vulnerability management. Everything is existing, but not related to the product, mainly related to the internal infrastructure. And this can be reused. And for those customers, I know they have done it. They are very successful in that.
Okay. You want to add something, Johana?
Yes, I wanted to add one point regarding outsourcing the process itself. So there are companies that hire a third company to write the complete cybersecurity management system. And sometimes you can see that the cybersecurity management system doesn't really integrate well into the company's environment. So you have some processes described that doesn't really fit the company. I have seen that, and the party that you're auditing, they're trying to explain how the generic cybersecurity management system fits their needs, but it doesn't, because it doesn't really play well with their quality management system or their safety system, and they have to rework it again. So this is a situation that I have encountered. I think that having a third party providing knowledge and services is totally fine, but if they integrate it properly into their customers' needs.
Okay. Thank you. So I have another question. Is this demand for cybersecurity audits mainly driven by OEMs, or there is also some, let's say, proactiveness from the tier 1s or tier 2 suppliers? Are they also pushing for the audits? What is your view on this?
Okay, maybe I will answer. So, so first, it's driven by the regulation that there's demand to fulfill cybersecurity over the whole supply chain. This means then, all OEMs more or less know this, and sometimes they will then give this requirement also then to their suppliers, but also tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers has a focus on this, so they know that this regulation is there, and they started also to integrate a CSMS based on the ISO, and doing it proactively. So it's a little bit different. So the OEMs, of course, needs this and needs to ensure that the complete supply chain is there, but also tier 1, tier 2 started and do it proactively to be compliant.
Yeah.
Anyone would like to add anything to this question?
Yes, I can add something. Some suppliers see that only as, yes, I need an audit, I need a certificate, and then the world is okay. That's the one extreme. The other one, are using that, I would say, that cybersecurity management system to improve their processes overall, because it has to be integrated in existing landscapes to be aligned with other cybersecurity, with other management system, as already mentioned. And this gives sometimes a chance to improve the overall process landscape, to improve it concerning efficiency and effectivity. And this is also a driver, because some suppliers want to be the first ones who say, yes, we are able to cover with that. We have the capability for cybersecurity. And additionally, we are optimizing the complete process landscape in that, I would say, in that activity to establish a cybersecurity management system, because it goes deeply into the complete development landscape.
I see we have a number of questions from the audience, but before going to those questions, I will like to ask another question. Okay, with the CSMS, have you observed also a ramp up in the SOMS audits? And how are they actually conducted in the absence of standardized auditing norms, so to say?
So there's no standard. Well, there was no standard for software updates. ISO 2489 was released recently, or well, beginning of the year. But the draft version of this had been around for some time now. So there was already something to base off with regards to implementation. And also the UNECE R156 regulation text itself, this was finalized already 2 years ago now. And also been in development for a long time. So this has essentially been what manufacturers have been orienting or basing their development on.
Yes, we already have some experience concerning R156 before the standard was published. Our approach was very simple. We want to see a systematic approach. A systematic approach to deal with software update management, to have the right campaigns, to have the right opportunities, to decide in an early stage which software part or which variant is relevant to which regulation, because this is more than the standard will provide. And on the other hand, you have the how to audit in the management system, and this all three things together is then the basis for doing such an audit concerning software update, even if the standard was not ready at that time.
Johana, do you have any experience in the SOMS?
Actually, no. I work mainly with suppliers.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So then I will go to the questions from the audience. Here I have the questions on the side, and there we use this app voting to check on the question, to prioritize the questions. So I will go with the first one. What will be the evidences expected from the CSMS during post-development phases? Who would like to take this question?
I can take it. In the production side, I would like to see that all the post-development requirements are fulfilled. That means related to production. So when the first flash was has to be done, what additional security mechanism have to be established, or what software update mechanism has to be established. And concerning the maintenance phase, that means after activation of the product, that means the vehicle or the respective electronic control units. An evidence could be that you see how easy it is to have access to a vehicle, if the vehicle is protected or if the electronic control units are protected. Protected all against the Annex 5 requirements, minimum, as well as the requirements for software update. And typical evidences is to demonstrate and to see what mechanisms are installed, and if it comes to type approval, then to see that really in a respective test scenario.
Okay, thank you. So here we have another question that I think it's nice if all of you can provide an answer to this. How many audits have you performed that had not been successful? You don't need to say the names. We just would like to understand the success rate.
One question, at the first time or?
Yeah, so I believe this is the question that
Yeah.
that they don't get it at the first time, so they need to work on the non-conformities.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think we've had any audit where we would give them a pass with flying colors the first time. There was always non-conformities that have to be addressed. There's definitely a few cases where we said, okay, these non-conformities are just so bad, let's start over. But it's rare to really get to the point that the CSMS is in such a state that absolutely no certification would be possible. But that's typically why, due to doing assessments before, because you don't just dive into a CSMS audit and hope for the best, because if that's your approach, you're going to fail. You are going to have to do a thorough analysis yourself or hire someone to do it for you. Make your case for an audit. I mean, when the auditor comes by, he's not there to solve a puzzle. You're going to present how you're meeting all the requirements. So by the time the audit rolls around, you should already be confident that you're going to pass. There might just be a difference of opinion on how you have chosen to solve things, but not. We shouldn't be running into okay, this whole part is missing entirely, because if that's something that happens during the audit, then it's an automatic fail. Yes, but that I've never seen.
I would have to agree with Jako. So we normally perform like a couple of iterations until everything is solved. So you can go through all chapters, and maybe one chapter is looking like 100%, the other 20%, 50%. So you have to go through all chapters and let them adjust all these findings. But yeah, it depends on the company. But exactly, I haven't seen that you go through the cybersecurity management system and everything is perfect. I haven't seen the case yet.
And were there cases where it was a real fail?
So I would say we have two perfectly prepared customers who passed at the first time on the R155 and on the 21434. So this is possible, but both companies have done their work since years on that. So they are very well prepared. The other ones need a second trial.
Dirk?
Yeah, I see it similar to Jako and Johana. For the first, that all was running smooth at the beginning was not the case. But I also, at the end, all managed to solve all issues to get the certificates then.
Okay, thank you. Then I will go to our next question. In your experience, what are the key differences in assessing cybersecurity maturity between established automotive manufacturers and newer tech-focused entrants into the industry?
The more tech-focused entrants will have make more use of tools, automation, whereas more established players have more traditional systems. They are also more able to, they have more experience dealing with connected online systems typically. So doing vulnerability management, keeping track of software, bill of materials, all these things are not something they have to redo. So that part, those things are already quite well established by the time we look at them, compared to, say, the established players.
I would add that the newcomers are able to react quickly. So if you need to make a change, they can implement the change, they can modify the tool. It's quite smooth. But if you have bigger companies that they have been working a traditional way, it takes some time until they create the documents, they get approved, and these kind of processes can delay the audit quite a while.
I agree to that. But due to the speed that I would say new and established automotive manufacturer have more speed. But on the other side, the other one have more experience and they know what they are doing due to that experience. And therefore, I can also bring you some examples that, that already long time existing companies in the supply chain as well as in the OEM side, they have a very good approach because they have completely understood what to do. But they have perhaps more time invested to create that management system.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to the next question. It seems a tough question. There is R155 regulation and ISO 21434 standard for CSMS. Is there any information available if ISO 21434 certificate will contribute towards R155 certification, and what further information is needed apart from ISO 24, I believe it's 21434 certificate for homologation?
So the R155 regulation has an interpretation document. If you Google UNECE R155 interpretation document, it will come up. And that's been updated after 21434 was published with references to 21434 evidences that you could show to the auditor for R155 to demonstrate compliance. But the certification itself is not something that it's for an R155 audit can be accepted as sufficient evidence just by itself. Yeah. They would still have to look at the evidences. For suppliers, it's slightly different. I mean, every OEM has to ensure that their supplier has cybersecurity capability, that they've managed vulnerabilities in the supply chain as part of the regulation. And a certificate helps with that to a certain extent. Either they have to do an audit themselves or validate themselves that you are capable, or you show evidence that you are capable. And their certificate helps. And also having a standardized nomenclature that the standard prescribes and provides helps also with the communication between suppliers and OEMs, particularly when auditing like legacy systems. You're asking for specifications, test reports. There you can really tell the difference if someone is using a supplier that's 21434 certified, because all the information is nicely structured and easily retrievable, or if they have some non-standard process where you then have to pick and choose and try to fit the information together.
Thank you. So the topic of vulnerability management and everything related to vulnerabilities comes again. So our next question is, what is the information in terms of evidence processes for vulnerability management that are or will be crucial for the homologation?
So we've dealt with that in a recent audit. So for example, vulnerability management, whenever you find problems, for example, by testing that you do yourself, there has to be a traceable path of, okay, you've received this evidence, now what have you done with it? You receive vulnerability information, there is the expectation that you've made a conscious decision, this information is relevant or not relevant, that there's some analysis behind that you can show. That if it's relevant and something you need to act upon, that you've made a decision as to why that is and how you're going to do it, and finally also a plan to roll it out. And that can be as simple as, okay, with the next OTA, we're running out this this version bump for this library because there's a minor problem and we want to fix it, but it doesn't create a vehicle risk, or the escalation up the whole chain where you're essentially creating an incident because it's a serious safety issue.
Perhaps also the time when an OEM or a supplier has started the vulnerability management on which basis of information is also something which is, yes, nice to see as an auditor. If there is a quick detection, or is there a detection after a long time where others have detected already some vulnerabilities? But this, I do not really understand the question, to be honest. It is of importance that you see that the vulnerability management is running. And if you do not have any vulnerability management evidence during a long term, and you do not have some information about the components you or your suppliers are using, this is really crucial for homologation. Because you have to be, as an OEM, when you do homologation, you have to be aware of all the cybersecurity risks coming from your own company and from the supply chain. And if you have no evidences on that, this is crucial.
You
Well,
mentioned about, please go ahead.
Yeah.
If you're an OEM and you have no evidence that there's any vulnerabilities that had to be managed, then presumably the process isn't working.
Thanks.
that would be my conclusion. I mean,
yes, this is what I pointed out.
Yeah, so you also mentioned about the sources of the vulnerabilities, and there is a question here: how critically are the sources used for automotive cybersecurity vulnerability management evaluated during the audit?
So the question focuses on which sources are taken into consideration for the vulnerability management.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or basically, how critical is the sources? How critical it is for the evaluation?
I would say that this is a rather important topic. When we discuss with our customer this vulnerability management part, they have to explain us why are these sources the right ones. Why is the reason? Why do you have 3 or 4 or 10 or just one? They have to say, they need to convince us that they have taken the right path for them.
Okay, thank you.
So I also can perhaps add that I would like to see a broad spectrum of information sources is used, because only one is a little bit less. Could be that it is enough, but I also would like to see to secure that by other sources, by other public or non-public sources, by perhaps some different viewpoints, at least from supplier side, if you're an OEM, or from the supply chain completely, and what you detected during your own testing, your own, I would say, pen testing, which is always also to be considered as a source for input of existing vulnerabilities, at least weaknesses and vulnerabilities. So
Okay.
the spectrum is also of importance.
Have you actually experienced in this area of vulnerability management a high level of maturity or rather low?
Difficult to answer.
I would say a high variance.
Yeah.
There's certain approaches I've seen where they have a good coverage, a broad spectrum, up to they're essentially just tracking what's being published in the CVE database, which probably isn't enough. So yeah, ideally you want to have that very broad spectrum, and that's not always the case.
Okay, thank you. So I will go to the next question, which is not related to vulnerability management. Tier 1 perspective for product development. It is implementation of security controls in the product, but if I see ISO 21434, does Tier 1 needs to implement everything or partial is okay? Today, I don't see any Tier 1 compliant with it.
Not sure I understand the question completely, but the requirement is not that the Tier 1 needs to implement all security requirements, but it's typically the level where you implement something that governs who will be adding those security requirements. If you're creating the software as a Tier 1, it's going to be very difficult for an OEM at the later stage to add security controls to that package. In which case, yeah, the Tier 1 needs to implement it, or maybe the Tier 2 who's providing software packages to that Tier 1 needs to implement those security requirements.
Let me add a remark. I would fully agree to that, because security by design needs that the OEM starts with security in depth with the highest level. And he has to do the cybersecurity architecture of his electronic architecture, and to specify the cybersecurity goals for that, and the respective requirements, which then goes to the suppliers. Therefore, the implementation and the planning of the EE architecture concerning cybersecurity has to come from the OEM. Otherwise, you will have a patchwork solution. Could run, but it's not, I would say, not a systematic approach.
I would like to add that the ISO 21434 standard tries to give a way to communicate between the supply chain. So we can have these partial solutions not being part of the picture anymore, but we can communicate the threats, what we see, how can we solve the threats with the defense in-depth approach. So I think that this standard is trying to solve this issue, having this communication, and that everyone in the supply chain is responsible of cybersecurity. Not just the OEMs in the end, or the suppliers for this particular component that they're developing.
Thank you. So here's another question. I think I made this question already before, but I will show it anyways. You mentioned Europe and the Asian market. What about the North America?
With regards to regulation or standardization, I mean, so NHTSA has put out these cybersecurity guidelines, which base very heavily on 21434, or directly reference the standard as a set of requirements to implement. It's a bit broader than what just 21434 itself does in terms of recommendation. But that's currently, yeah, what's driving most of the questions for audits, at least that I've seen from North America.
Okay, thank you. I have another very interesting question here. What about the validation part of the 21434? How do you see suppliers handling it? And how do you judge it within an audit, as the standard is asking for validation at the vehicle level, which is not available for the supplier?
So just because you build the part and are not able to test it by itself doesn't mean you cannot be part of testing this part when it's actually integrated into a more complex system. And in many cases, you will want to be a part of that integrated testing, because as a developer of the system, you have firsthand knowledge of how it should and should not function. So it makes perfect sense for, say, a tier one not to do certain validation tests that happen at the OEM level, but that they are still involved in that actual testing simply because of their expertise of the system they've created.
Yeah. Nothing to add. Fully agree to that. The supplier has to support the OEM in doing that.
So it's something that comes up relatively often in a 21434 audit, where someone says, oh yeah, we built the part, we don't do vehicle validation, so this doesn't apply. And then our answer always is, no, it does. You're just not doing the testing directly, but you're still, the standard has this whole responsibility table for who is doing what in a particular activity. You're still involved, you're still consulted. You're maybe not directly executing the validation, but it's not something that doesn't concern you at all. It should be something you have considered in your process.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah,
Please go ahead.
Maybe to add. Normally, there should be maybe also an interface agreement between the OEM and the supplier, tier one supplier, so that such kind of validation can be executed then on vehicle level.
So, Dirk, the next question is actually for you. I mean, for all of you, but maybe you can start. Is there anything from the auditor's perspective that is missing from the regulation and standards that should be addressed or must be addressed?
Puh. For the moment, yeah, I think no, not really. So the regulation is there, and we have yeah, the interpretation guide and so on. So yeah, and we developed our audit guidelines, and it's but yeah, one thing, the pass-fail criteria in the regulation, so it's very this is something which is missing. So yeah, there's no yeah, hard. The requirements are not hard. So there's so no pass-fail criteria. So it's just yeah, difficult sometimes to address.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment. It's an open regulation and an open standard, which means that there's still a fair bit of interpretation of what is and is not sufficient, or what is and is not appropriate. So you ask two people, you get three opinions, and that's still something that needs to also evolve over time. I think also with regulators, who have found themselves are also struggling with, okay, this I accept, but this I don't, and then quantify as to why one is acceptable but the other is not, without like prior evidence to fall back on and say this has worked in practice so far, so that should be accepted. Is something that's still ongoing.
Yeah, I would also address something, for example, the validation. In the R155, there is no rule given for what is the maximum or the minimum you have to do for validation. There are no rules for pen testing. There are no rules how the execution of pen testing should be done, what experience the pen testers should have, and what happens if you find something during pen test in a type approval, for example, directly related to the start of production at an OEM. This is not a typical audit, but if you are looking in the cybersecurity management system, you need some processes to define that. Otherwise, you will have challenges to execute type approval. And this is also something which is perhaps a little bit missing, that there are no criteria for defined as a minimum to have something in hand to say, yes, this process is well established, for example, for validation, and to see that the pen testing, for example, an external partner has done is sufficient. And this relates to the audit on the one hand, as well as to the type approval. And this is similar to 21434. What is enough in validation and what is not enough?
Very good question. So we have
Right.
we have time for just the last question because and I will then show it on the stage. There will probably be risks which cannot be addressed until July 2024, especially for the legacy architectures. So there will be a risk acceptance process. What kind of limitation will you expect for risk acceptance? For example, no safety impact?
I don't think any regulator would accept a cybersecurity risk that has a safety impact. That's an absolutely no-go. The only exception where I could see here is if this particular vehicle is a race car that's driving on a racetrack and the person driving in it is wearing protective gear and what have you, and there's safety people standing by. But other than that situation, it's an absolute no-go. When it comes to, okay, the vehicle might not start again, or you have to take it into the shop, these are all, well, it's not great, but these are all things that money can solve. And as long as it's a money can solve problem, that's where you can say, well, we'll accept the risk. That's why we have insurance. But anything safety, absolutely not.
Yeah, fully agree.
We can just agree to that.
Okay, perfect. So we are just about on time. And as we conclude, I would like to thank our exceptional panelists for sharing their expertise, their experience. Especially Thomas, you made a break in your vacation to be with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Special thanks to Sergey for co-organizing this panel and the conference organizers for the invitation for me to moderate, and of course our engaged audience for their thoughtful questions. Our panelists will be available for a few minutes. If anyone would like to speak with them, I saw there are many more questions there. Then you can join them at the lunch. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you for
having us.
moderating.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.